God are the children of God. Simple as that. Those that are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. That's why I don't worry when I get things wrong. I don't want to get things wrong, but sometimes in my life I felt that the times when I've done things wrong have led me to where I am today. Do you know that thing called Jesus' unanswered prayers? You pray and pray and pray that something happens, and you think for a moment, oh, Jesus wasn't listening because he hadn't done anything I've asked. And then you realise, glory stories, which I use that phrase all the time, that you look back and you realise that I was meant to meet Jean and David and Pete, and I was meant to meet Aubrey and Sheila and all their children. I was meant to be with the sorrow when we lost Sharon. I was meant to be there. But I wanted to be somewhere else. And for all of that, and all lots of other stuff, really bad stuff, I'm here today. Now that sounds dreadful, doesn't it? For all the bad stuff, I'm here today. Like, oh, you're the last resort. But actually, for me, you probably were the last resort. Because when Patrick took me in and took me under his wing, I was lower than you ever knew I was low. Patrick was like the eagle, under the eagle's wing. And I think many of you realise that, but we didn't make it absolutely public. But I was so broken, I was about to fall to pieces. But here I am, being given the ultimate job to look after you. That's scary. Especially when I do the wrong thing.
Well, that's scary.
Well, it is. And I haven't given myself any time for concern. But maybe it's meant to be short, even though it's 6 pages. But it is 16 point. Normally it's 10. But I'm just going to give you the Bible passages, because sometimes I think that we did all these big sermons, but all we need is Bible passages, really. And just to explain it just a little bit. So I'm just going to do this. Remember, I have no glasses, but I've got a 16 point, so I'm just about making out. Hebrews 9:22. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with the blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. So, if Jesus didn't die on the cross and shed his blood, we wouldn't be forgiven. So forgiveness takes a great sacrifice, the greatest sacrifice on earth, to be forgiven, but humans can't forgive very well. What if we had one of the worst, vilest criminals come in this church with all the safeguarding that we have in place? Are we going to turn them away? Because basically safeguarding kind of tells us to do that. They say that they don't. It's not that I'm poo-pooing safeguarding, because I'm not. I have to safeguard my congregation. I have to safeguard you. And I'm telling you, for all this safeguarding, and with the violence of criminals come in here and ask for forgiveness, will you turn them away? Because I won't. But I tell you what, I'll be persecuted for it. There'll be people out there that will want to persecute me. Put me on the cross. There's a place for safeguarding. Don't think I'm not saying that, because I am. But in our Bible studies, we have been learning how God chose to place his grace on the Gentiles, and the food and sacrifice laws are no more because of the sacrificial lamb in Jesus. We've been learning that when Peter had this vision, a big blanket came down, and all these animals, unclean animals were there, and Jesus said, eat them. And he said, I can't, they're unclean. And he said, nothing is unclean in my eyes. Nothing is unclean. You think that when murder, awful murder, we've heard of a dreadful murder today, and normally murder produces blood. So we actually see that God actually used the one thing that is actually a meaning of murder, a meaning of the shedding of blood that kills a life. He's using that to cleanse you. That's huge, isn't it? But after all, did they not murder Jesus? They murdered him. But they tried to put all the blame onto him for their own sin. For their own sin. Because they were trying to put all the blame on Jesus to get away with all the criminal acts that they were doing. Oh, have things changed today? How many people are dying in Russia and Ukraine? Syria, Afghanistan, England even. Do you know that there's a huge slave trade in England? Did you know that? Huge slave trade. A lot of people don't know that. I used to come away from some place and I used to think, oh, they need to get another job, they're not happy at all. And then I was told about the slave trade, and then I felt dreadful, and I was convicted. And I thought, oh my goodness, no wonder they're unhappy. It might not have been all of them. Some of them might have lost their boyfriend in the morning or something, but a lot of them, I think, of these people are really sad because they have no choice. And that's in England. But Christ was the only way God could reconcile us to himself. We'd gone so far away from God that the only way that he could bring us back was by the shedding of blood on the cross so that we could be forgiven. But still, the world out there, that's mad, isn't it? The world out there's gone bonkers. Well, I'll tell you a wonderful thing yesterday is I played at the Jubilee Festival on the King George V playing field yesterday. The Rocking Rev played.
Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
Yes,
Thank you, God.
amen to that. Amen to that. And I tell you what, when I went out afterwards and went round, you want to hear the things that people were saying. Wonderful things. Not about the music necessarily, but about, wow, look at you. The Rocking Rev. You give us hope. Things like that. People saying things like that. It makes a difference, doesn't it? It makes a difference. It really does. And remember, the spirit you received, it said in our reading, does not make you slaves so that you live in fear. Rather, the spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. Do you know, Abba, it's not a proper translation, but the translation does get translated into daddy. Daddy. Justina calls me daddy. I'm not sure that she does when she's with her friends. I think that may turn into dad. But at home and with the family, I'm still daddy. And that's the most endearing, isn't it, daddy? Yeah? And so we say to God, daddy. And as God's children, we are co-heirs with Christ. We're co-heirs with Christ. We've become brothers and sisters with the Son of God. Do you accept that? Do you realise the strength of that? That we have become brothers and sisters with Christ. So if we go out there without the power of Christ in us, and forgiveness and love and care, we're going out there dishonouring God and his Son. I'm going to use a term that I shouldn't use, but what's your goal? Because that's the dangerous thing a lot of the time. But it's also your actions. I have to move on swiftly, but Philippians says in 1:29, for it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. Have any of you said, and I'm going to say I certainly have, has any of you said, why me? I've served you all my life. I've done everything I can possibly. Why me? My mum says, oh, it's always the bad people get everything. It's always the good people that suffer. But actually, the passage says, share in his sufferings in order that we may also share in his glory. I mean, obviously, I don't want to talk about me, but you know a lot of my story. And we're going to have this as my story. We're going to have it again here. We're going to invite as many people as we can. We're going to invite everybody, no matter how bad I may be. We're going to invite everybody. Come and hear my story. How suffering can turn to glory. Glory stories. I'm going to invite Jean to come and do that. Would you come and do glory stories? Because I'm always telling people about Jean's glory stories, but I don't think anybody really actually understands what I'm talking about. So we'll have to have Jean come and do glory stories. It's amazing. You look back at your life and you go, oh, I suffered, why me, why me, why me? And then suddenly you get this revelation and go, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be where I am. And you look back and turn those sufferings into glory stories. Some of you might not be here today if it wasn't because of your sufferings. Philippians 3:10, I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. Do you want to be like Jesus Christ? Doesn't mean whether you're a woman or a man. Jesus is gender neutral, I think they call it these days, don't they? I have to be so careful with what I say. But we're in a world where we get tripped up all the time by what we say. But, we're the bride. We're the bride of Christ. There you go. It is critical that we adopt the same mentality to seek after Jesus and live for him. To desire to walk in his footsteps of Christ is a good thing. It brings healing, understanding, and more importantly, humility. Humility is important. Boy, have I been humbled. I tell you what, anybody who tells me that they go on stage as an entertainer because they don't want to be clapped, anybody tells me that, I'm looking at a liar. Do you know, the one thing that I think the preacher wants is for people to glorify the preacher, and mostly what we get is lovely hymns. But you shouldn't be looking for glory, you should be looking for the glory in you. What the preacher and the minister, and even an entertainer, there were people, we had a whole load of line dancers. Line dancers in front of it, loads of, well, I say loads, probably 30, I don't know how many there may have been 12, I don't know, but they were all line dancing and people joining in and they were all loving it and enjoying it, and and I looked there and I'm saying, look, isn't this wonderful? He's wonderful, he's the minister, I was wearing my dog collar and everything, And we've got all these people listening, and all these people that are not coming to our church, but they're seeing the love of Christ on stage. I wasn't singing worship songs, but they knew who I was and what I meant and what I stood for, didn't they?
Yeah.
Get out with the people. The trouble is, in church, we're preaching to the converted every Sunday. I've got to finish because I'm running out of time. But there is rejoicing in what we go through because of who Jesus is. These are the sufferings that come to us because we follow Jesus. These are the sufferings that drive us to a closer walk with him. It's not a matter of wondering what's next, but walking after him daily because we walk after him. This gives us access to God in an intimate way. It is not in a way that we have to be timid, but we can come directly to him. You know, a lot of people will say, your God. And I've often said, what do you mean, my God? It's your God too. Yeah, but I don't believe in him. I say, well, he believes in you. And then often or not, they don't know what to say after that. I've told you the story, haven't I? About how many musicians, a lot of them, and I dare say this, but very debauched musicians. And a few of them, like 15, 20 years later, phoned me and said, Jas, I've become a Christian. And they normally say something on the lines of, you never judged me, you never left me, you never mistreated me, even though I mistreated you terribly and done dreadful things to you, and you never, ever left me. I say, it's because I loved you. And I have some of the biggest debauched musicians ever. They come up, they give me a cuddle. I tell you, this is normal, Maria will tell you. Give me a cuddle, kiss me on my head, and tell me they love me. Biggest, tell me they love me, And that's the thing in life, isn't it? You can love men and women without it being wrong. You can love with a deep love without having an affair. You can have deep love with a man or a woman. You can, because there's different kinds of love. But Jesus died on that cross because of agape. Agape is when you'll give your life for somebody because you love them that much. You love them that much. So, Hebrews 4, and I'm going to have to finish. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And that's the thing. That's the thing. I'm going to end. But I'm going to end with a little illustration. Grace in the time of need. Now, I'm not going to point Debbie out, but Debbie says grace all the time. And it's true. We need grace. Grace is like the cleansing power. Grace. How many people have the grace of God to forgive, to let go, to understand? I'm just going to say, just very quickly, I'm going to move over, but I've got to say this. I know I'm quarter of an hour over, but I did do communion. Now, I'm just going to say, I've been thinking an awful lot about these acrylic panels, these stained glass windows that we're having. It's a major thing, by the way. Cool, we mustn't break them. Worries me. You must not clean them with sprays. Don't clean them with sprays. It's just a little duster, right? But they are just acrylic panels. The artist might want to hit me by saying that, but actually the importance of them is what they mean. And I've been thinking, and I've been pondering, that these are not got Jesus, baby Jesus, Mary, the cross. They haven't got any of that on there. No religious symbolism at all, because they were designed for the hospice for people with faith and none. But I tell you what, they speak absolutely much louder to me than religious art. And I've been pondering things, there was something about them, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, why have these hit me in the heart? When actually, I was expecting those panels to have Jesus, the baby Jesus, or Jesus with the shepherd crook, and all that, and the pictures, the Bible, what the original stained glass windows. And then I thought, but what hit me mostly about the 4 seasons, which they are, and how apt it is that they are for faith and none, but they are for those to ponder their mourning and loss of loved ones, but even more so, to ponder and reflect on their sufferings and trauma. When people go somewhere, and it's sad that the chapel at the hospice is probably going to go, which is the one place I would think a chapel should be, but we are going to end up, I think, as the chapel. But you know, people don't go just to mourn. They go in there for their suffering, to their traumas. But they often don't think about that. But they're going to sit here, pondering, lighting a candle, and the same people that raised the money for the panels are raising the money for a votive for the candles, which of course is very Catholic, but we found one that's not very Catholic. But the thing is, lighting a candle, I don't know about you, some of you might not, but lighting a candle actually means something to me. It doesn't mean I'm Catholic, by the way.
It's the light of the world.
It means a lot to me to light a candle and ponder. But they will be pondering on their suffering. But the one panel that comes out, the one panel that comes out to me, and I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, but the one panel that comes out to me is the spring panel. And I'll tell you why that comes out to me, because it reminds us of coming out of the darkness of winter into a time of regrowth and the beauty of the image of the baby badger popping out after being born and reared underground in the darkness. Born again. Coming out of being born in the darkness and coming out of the light. I'm just going to end because I'm losing a few people on the Zoom. Sorry, but this does happen in community services. But I just want to just give this illustration before I end. The image is of a coiled spring, tightly compressed, waiting to be released. Picture that. Spring. Spring, a cold spring, waiting to be released.
Yes.
Creation is standing on its tiptoes, leaning forward, straining its neck with anticipation, ready. Consider for a moment the importance of God's patience with us, even in sin. He awaits our returning for repentance and forgiveness, which he gives freely. However, today we see the paradise completely lost to a fallen world. But we're like a cold spring, and we're going to spring up. And we're like the badgers coming out, popping up everywhere, popping up everywhere. Badgers coming to say, here is the light coming. The longer days, here is the light coming, the summer, the spring is springing out, and the coil is bouncing out. And that is what I believe is going to happen to this church. Creation waits with eager longing. It groans in the pains of childbirth. But we must grasp in this that we are living today. We can no longer make excuses to paint over our current situation, but we must be able to express to all. Today our world continues to fall apart through natural disasters and through God's very clear revelation to us that it isn't going to end immediately. Our present state of living is a sinful world that has brought us to where we are now. But it's not all bad news. It's true that creation is in shambles today, but Jesus overcame it on the cross. Don't forget that. Jesus overcame it. I'm really ending now. 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overcome you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will provide a way out so that you can endure it. So we can overcome if we remain faithful to Christ, for he is the only way. Wait, uncall or spring. Pop out and take that glory and that happiness to others and fill the church with God's people. Amen.
Amen.